Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Comcare's Transport Network Forum. I'm Tom Dawson, and I'm South Australia and Northern Territory Regional Director at Comcare, and I'm happy to be your MC for today's event. We hold these forums twice a year, with the last one being in June this year. A warm welcome to those of you joining us for the first time, and for those of you who've previously attended one of these forums, welcome back. Thank you for your ongoing support and input. I'm really looking forward to today's program, building on the valuable insights and learnings from the previous forum and sharing an exciting program with you today. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we are virtually meeting today. I'm speaking from Adelaide, so I'd like to acknowledge the Kaurna people, the traditional custodians of the land. I pay my respects to their elders, past and present. Also acknowledge the contribution they make to this nation, and I extend that respect to all Indigenous and Torres Strait Islander people who are present today. Excuse me. Today we welcome representatives from a broad range of organisations in the transport and logistics industry, as well as defence, other regulators, and from research and academia, and not-for-profits and other organisations. So although this is a Transport Network Forum, there are lots of takeaways we find from these forums that benefit other workplaces as well. So we welcome everyone. Please feel free to let us know in the chat function where you're dialing in from today. Bit of housekeeping before we get going. Everyone here brings a different and valuable perspectives and insights to the conversation. We want to make this session as interactive as we can in the virtual environment. So we welcome you to engage and share your thoughts and generally interact with each other. We do ask that the comments in the chat remain respectful and relevant to the forum, please. The forum is being recorded today, and the recording will only pick up our presenters and the slides shown on the screen. So you may notice your microphone and your camera are not able to be turned on. For accessibility, the recording will include the option of closed captions, which we are hoping to make available through Comcare's website within the next week. We have a great program loaded up today. There's the first transport pun. Sorry about that. I'm sure there'll be a few more. And we're ready to roll out the door. To tell you about it and officially get us on the road, we've got Justin Napier. Justin is our General Manager from the Regulatory Operations Group, and he's going to get this started today. So please welcome Justin and take it away. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Tom, and good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for being here today at the Transport Network Forum. As Tom said, I'm the General Manager of Comcare's Regulatory Operations Group, and I'm joining from Melbourne today. So I'd like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations, who are the traditional custodians of this land, and pay my respects to elders past and present. So it's a pleasure to welcome you to the second of our Transport Network Forums for 2024. Thank you to those of you who have joined us today, and a big welcome to those joining for the first time. Today's forum takes place during National Safe Work Month. National Safe Work Month is held annually during October and aims to raise awareness and enable discussion about safety at work. This initiative is driven by Safe Work Australia and supported by work health and safety jurisdictions across the nation, including Comcare. The theme for this year's Safe Work Month is Safety is Everyone's Business. Today's forum addresses a critical aspect of the heavy transport sector, rest areas and the principles of a good rest. As we all know, Australia's heavy transport industry plays a pivotal role in keeping our economy moving. The lifeblood of our supply chain, the road transport sector delivers goods across the country, connecting remote areas to urban centres and ensuring that the essential items we rely on daily reach us. So over the past few years, this commitment and dedication has been more evident than ever. Throughout the pandemic, our truckies stepped up, keeping communities connected and supplied despite unprecedented challenges. Then, when natural disasters struck, like the recent floods in Fitzroy Crossing, drivers went above and beyond. I'm aware of examples where some drove an extra 4,500 kilometres to deliver crucial supplies to flood-affected communities. Their willingness to take on such enormous challenges highlights the resilience and determination that are central to our transport sector and our economy more broadly. But with this extraordinary dedication comes great responsibility to support the well-being of those who keep our supply chains moving. A major challenge facing our truck drivers is the unpredictable nature of their work. Many drivers face irregular schedules, constantly shifting routes, and inconsistent sleep and meal patterns, and this can make it difficult to maintain good health and alertness. These disruptions directly impact driver safety, particularly as the drivers navigate long-haul routes, shift work, and the demanding conditions on our roads. And with the Christmas period approaching, we're gearing up for one of the busiest and most demanding times of the year, making it even more important that we turn our attention to the well-being of our drivers. As we explored in the forum earlier this year, a key challenge in this industry is the management of fatigue. Week to week, drivers might be on entirely different schedules, and this not only disrupts their circadian rhythms, but it also makes it difficult for them to get consistent and quality rest. This unpredictability can lead to increased fatigue and stress, which can in turn affect their safety and the safety of others on the road. This is clearly an important topic. And with this in mind, we are focusing today's session on rest and rest areas. And this was a topic raised by attendees at previous forums. Ensuring that drivers have access to appropriate rest areas with adequate facilities goes beyond providing comfort. It directly impacts their ability to comply with fatigue management regulations, which are designed to ensure the safety and well-being of both drivers and the broader public. In hosting forums like today's, we aim to support both workers and PCBUs to have healthier work environments, and for employers to take all reasonably practicable steps to ensure drivers get the rest they need to do their job in a safe and healthy manner. So I'm particularly excited to introduce our two guest speakers who will help shed further light on these issues. First, we have Rod Hannafy, founder of TruckRight, and a passionate advocate for the safety and well-being of our truck drivers. With years of hands-on experience behind the wheel, Rod has been a vocal champion for improving the conditions that drivers face on the road. His insights into the current state of rest areas and his ideas for improvement will be invaluable to today's discussions. And we will also hear from Sue Reed, a registered psychologist and the founder and director of Life Unlimited. Sue brings a wealth of expertise on the mental and physical health challenges faced by those in high-stress, irregular work environments like our transport drivers. Sue will explore how consistent access to proper rest facilities and healthy food options can not only improve physical well-being, but also significantly support mental resilience, which is just as important for our driver safety. Together, these experts will help us to understand the importance of good quality rest and recuperation from both a workplace and personal perspective. So thanks in advance to our presenters, and thank you to you all for joining us for today's session. I look forward to the insights and discussions we will have today. Back to you. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you, Justin. And just to add to Justin's comments as well, we've previously in these forums looked at fatigue management, and we've looked at psychosocial risks of isolated workers and considering the transport industry, the long work hours and the time away from home, etc. And some feedback was around what are the standard of rest areas? What is the situation and status of rest areas across the country? And that was some feedback we got. So today we're gonna shed some light on the rest areas, and then we're also going to look at what can be done to the principles of a good break. What can you do, whether you're a truck driver or somebody else in a dynamic work environment, to have a healthy break and look after your mind and body? So now I'm going to introduce Rod, our first speaker today, Rod Hannafy. Rod is the founder of TruckRight, and he's a passionate advocate for the safety and well-being of truck drivers. With years of hands-on experience behind the wheel, Rod has been a vocal champion for improving the conditions that drivers face on the road. His insights into the current state of rest areas and his ideas for improvement will be valuable today. Please join me in welcoming Rod. Rod, I think we've got the issue with your camera again. Hey, there you go. Hello, Rod. And just as a bit of, I've been engaging with Rod over the last couple of weeks, and I think I got vicarious anxieties and a bit of a slight insight into the life of a long haul truck driver, because really Rod's schedule has been changing. He's had breakdowns, he's had changes to schedules, so that really is a slight insight for me, and raising awareness about how important this is and how much we rely on the flexibility and resilience of our truck drivers. So welcome, Rod. To start with, Rod, tell us a bit about yourself, how long you've been driving trucks, where you work, and what led you to be so heavily involved in advocating for better rest areas.
Mate, I drive B doubles mainly, done probably over 6 million kilometres. I got involved in road safety after an incident on the road. I slept at Narrabri, got up in the morning, hadn't hit highway speed, and a car overtook me with another B double coming the other way. Both of us went off into the dirt. There was 2 little kids in the back of the car. I actually rang the police. They did pull the car up later on. I thought that's a good start to the day. A couple of hours later, coming down onto a narrow bridge, flashed my lights at the vehicle coming the other way to say, back off, just let me a bit of room. No, missed the bridge and the car by centimetres and thought, well, that's number 2 and things come in 3. I really don't look forward to number 3. I pulled up on the side of the road and thought, how do I fix this? And I've been involved in road safety. I'm the past president of the National Road Freighters Association. I won the Truck Driver of the Year award many years ago, and I'm on the Heavy Vehicle Safety and Steering Committee, Rest Area Committee in Canberra. So, and that's to meet next week again to look at further rest areas for truck drivers. From where I sit, mate, the only national study I'm aware of was done in 2012 by ARB, and at that time, not one of our major highways met the national minimum suggested standard. They use the word required. Since then, we have had a set of national heavy vehicle rest area guidelines, but that's it. They're only guidelines. There's no mandate. There's no requirement for the government to act on it. And from where I sit now, mate, as someone that's been doing this for 30 years, at the moment, we are going backwards. We are losing sites. There are more trucks. Yes, we have a bit of trouble with caravanners using our sites. And since COVID, there's a lot more of them on the road. And yet everybody still wants us to deliver everything for everybody to suit them at their time. During COVID, we were treated badly. We had a national freight protocol which was ignored. And at one stage, the police walked into a roadhouse and threatened that roadhouse with a $10,000 fine if they fed a truck driver. So how the hell we were supposed to say, stay fit and keep going during it? No one else really cared, mate. And there are times when I get really frustrated, but I haven't given up yet.
Okay, Rod. Well, you paint quite a grim picture. Is there anything on the horizon to get some improvements in this situation?
Look, the heavy vehicle rest area guidelines are being reviewed. Again, I've spoken to the man involved in that, and I've said to him exactly what I've just said to you, that these are guidelines, they're not mandatory, and until such times as they are mandatory, and I'll give you 2 examples. The Toowoomba bypass was built a number of years ago, 27 kilometres. There are a number of stopping bays on that bypass. There is no truck rest area. There's 200,000 hectares either side of that. And last week, the Gympie bypass was opened, probably 40 kilometres. Now, Gympie's not a truck-friendly town for the topography, the hills and lights on top. There was very little parking, but you had access to a couple of servos if you were really lucky. Now, all of those have been bypassed again. There is not one single parking place put in place. And until the service centre at Traviston was built, if you came down the Bruce Highway from Childers to Brisbane, there were 10 signed truck parking bays, 10 for the thousands of trucks that use that road every day. Traviston has done it, but I've been into Traviston at night, couldn't even park at the Bowser to walk in and use the toilet or get a coffee because it was chock-a-block full. So there is not enough capacity for us. And it's not just about a place to sleep. It's a place to get good quality sleep. Again, an example, Vic Road spent money. They did up a rest area called Chiltern, just south of Albury. Now, it's the first one in Victoria. It used to have five sign bays and 4 bays at the back. They spent nearly $1 million. We went from 9 spaces to 10. That $1 million could have spent another site, could have had more capacity. And the first time I went in there after the revamp, I thought, oh, this is good. There'll be room in here. I had to drive out onto the Hume Highway, reverse park my B double back in between 2 others on the shoulder because I was out of hours, couldn't legally travel on. The next one was too far away and I was tired. And that's just a couple of examples of what we have to try and deal with.
Thanks, Rod. When we see rest areas for the sort of layperson driving around the highways, we see a siding and think, that, a truckie can park up there. He's probably got his or her meal and maybe their book or their podcast. But it's more than that, isn't it? Why are rest areas important? And we need more than just an area to park, isn't that right?
We do. Again, for shade, I've been trying to get shade in rest areas for 20 years. Now, people think that we all drive all day and drive all night. And if that was the case, that'd be lovely. But a lot of us have to drive during the night and sleep during the day. Now, if you pull up in the middle of the Moree Plains, there's a parking bay there called Keegabor. It's a big open area of bitumen. And on the southbound side, there was one tree. And I actually had people in the truck from the RTA and I said, when we come around the corner in the daytime, I bet you there's a truck under that tree. And he said, oh, you set that up. You got to make the park there. I said, no, that's the only tree for 500 kilometres that we can get under and park in the daytime and go to bed. So good quality sleep means somewhere you can be without having a truck 6 inches either side of you, that when you've just laid down 15 minutes into your 7-hour break, you've done what you need, you're just starting to fall asleep. And because of the herringbone design, so there's 2 designs, there's herringbone, like sausage sizzle, or there's parallel, where you like park either side of a roadway. Now, so many are herringbone, which is fine if all I want is a 15-minute break or maybe an hour's kip just to get me going. But if I pull into that bay for a 7-hour break, and every 15 or 20 minutes, the truck beside me either starts up, gets air up, roars off into the night, the next one comes in, drops the maxi brakes, slams the door while he goes to the toilet. Mate, if you can get good sleep there, you're doing better than me. The one advantage we have now is a thing called an ice pack. Now, there are some trucks that have battery-driven air conditioning systems, but generally, if you're not careful, they run the batteries flat. An ice pack does create noise. It's a separate engine system to the truck engine, rather than like in America, they sit up and they just leave the truck or idle all night. And it creates white noise for me because there's some noise there to dissipate a truck pulling up beside me. But if the poor bugger beside me pulls up, he wants to have a 7-hour break and it's 35 degrees in the sun or it's still 27 degrees in the dark, my thing then keeps him awake because he doesn't have one. So the design of rest areas is critical. We do have people with stock crates and fridge vans. Now, blokes that cart stock, they're used to the stock going moo, moo, kick, bang. Blokes that cart fridge vans, they're used to the fridge van cycling. I'm not. So if I park beside them because the only spot left is that one, then I'm not used to that. Then I'm not going to get that good quality sleep.
Yes. And what is industry doing about this? Is there anyone lobbying and for this? Because it's obviously important. We're a big country and we rely on the transport industry.
Yeah, there's me, who's been doing it for 20 years. Finally, some of the associations have started to support it. NatRoad's been involved for a few years. I badgered people like the ATA. I talked to the QTA. I talked to the VTA. I'm in contact with every single one of them. This money that was offered by the federal government before they got into government last year to provide money for rest areas, in my 30 years on the road, that's the first time that sort of money has been offered. And yet we are still struggling to get councils and governments to apply because it is co-funded. So they can't just come to us and say, well, you go and build us a rest area there. We'll go back and have a coffee and she'll be all good. They've got to contribute. They've got to put in an application and they have to co-fund it. So the money is there. The applications have not been. But there are 2 things I will mention quickly. One is many of your listeners might know what a stockpile site is. Now, a lot of the time, if you, let's say, as you're driving down the road, you look at a rest area for cars, and it'll have the sign saying rest. It'll have a tree. It might have a table and chairs. A lot of those sites either have no truck signs or they're not really compatible for the size of vehicle. Another example, you go to the Northern Territory, it's a bloody long way from the Queensland border to Darwin. Every car bay signed as a rest area has toilets, tables and chairs, facilities. There is only one truck bay that you can go in there in a triple road train and use a toilet. The others, you cannot even park on the shoulder and walk in and use those toilet facilities. Now, I do a spot on radio each week, and you wouldn't credit it. Last week, I was coming down through a section of road called the Pilliga. It's about 120 kilometres from Narrabri to Coonabarabran. Probably 10 years, 15 years ago, there used to be a sign up that said it was a black spot area for fatigue. So it's a known area for accidents for fatigue. It's a long travel in the bush with nothing there at all. I begged, I emailed, I rang, I jumped up and down, I wrote lists. They built 3 rest areas at the southern end, 3 within 5 kilometres. Then there was nothing for 100k. And they wondered why people had accidents. I eventually complained at the northern end. There was a big area there that was dirt. I said, oh, look, these potholes are dangerous. And they said, oh, it's not our problem. And I said, oh, so you're happy to come out and recover the truck at 2 o'clock in the morning because he had nowhere to stop. Then the council went out and fixed the rest area for me. But I shouldn't have to do that. And there is very little recognition from the public about how we operate what we do. You said before about taking your meal. Yes, meals have got so expensive on the road. Roadhouses, years ago, you could get a meal at midnight. You could ring them, walk in and get a decent meal. Now, if you haven't got fed by 8 o'clock, mate, you go without. And they close early. And even worse is that all of the new service centres that are being built, the toilets are inside the service centre. In the past, they were outside. So you could still pull up and park there at night. You might not be able to go in and get a coffee, but you could use the toilet. Now they're all inside and locked. So if you're not there when the service centre's open, those toilets are gone as well. There's just not enough toilets, mate. In the end, last week, I had to pull up on the side of the road, run out into the bush and go to the toilet. Now, how many other people live like that, honestly?
Yeah, you certainly paint a quite a depressing picture of the current state there. And is the challenge as well that it's federal, state, and local governments? So, you know, you've got to navigate between those.
Look, in one way, each blames the other. We used to have a federal highway system. They gave it all back to the states. Now we don't have a federal highway network as such, so no one's responsible, and I have to ring each state, and then I have to ring each council. As I said to you at the start, mate, stockpile sites. On every road, there is a bit of dirt that the government uses to store their road-based material or their asphalt where they're going to relay the road, and they use that about 3 months every 3 years. Now, there are thousands of those sites. Many of them are suitable for us at the moment. A lot of them are just being cut into the scrub, so they do actually have shade, which most of the truck areas don't. And we could solve the truck rest area problem tomorrow if I could get every state government to agree to allow us to use those stockpile sites. Now, I'll be very blatant with you right now. One of the reasons they won't, because they're worried that a truck driver is going to go in there and shit in their bit of dirt. I'm terribly sorry, but that's the truth. That's why they don't want us in those sites. And if we have to do the right thing as well, I've got no doubt about that. I will say I've had a bit of success with the South Australian government after only 22 years of begging and whinging and emailing and ringing up. They have just done 24 green reflector bays from Port Augusta to the West Australian border. 12 of those sites are stockpile sites. And in discussions, he said, look, we're a bit worried. We don't know what we're going to do. And I said, well, how about you just put up a little sign where the stockpile bay is that says stockpile in use 3 months, closed for trucks. I said, that gives us some warning, because the other 2 factors are, if I know a road very well, because I travel that road every night, I know where every bit of dirt is that I might be able to pull up safely off the side of the road. If I'm a bit tired, I can either have 15 minutes over the wheel, I can have a power nap, and you're all aware of the power nap program, and that's fine as long as you're got somewhere to power nap. That's the other problem. But I might be able to get out, kick the tyres, walk around the truck, look at the stars, and make it to the next formal bay. But if I don't know that road, or I'm to that point of tiredness where I'm driving along buggered and I'm looking for somewhere to stop, and by the time I say, oh, geez, look, oh, a bit of dirt, I could have stopped there. So you're either locking up at the last minute, which is dangerous, or you miss that one knowing I don't know where the next one is. So the green reflector marking came from exactly one of those nights. I drove a fuel tanker over the Blue Mountains because I drive B doubles. You're not allowed in there with 26 metre B doubles. I brought a single home. I had 33,000 litres of petrol on and I was tired and I should not have been on the road. But I didn't know the road well enough to know where the rest areas were, and there's not enough. And in the end, I had to drive through to Molong and I contacted a bloke at the RTA and I said, look, the guideposts are there. What if we could come up with a system to mark that bit of dirt? Now, one step back, most of our rest areas, if you look at truck rest areas, you are lucky to get a bin. Geez, even occasionally, it might even be paved, so it's not dirt and you're covered in dust if you leave the window open because you don't have an ice pack. But that's it. Very rarely do we get other facilities. I've got to give credit to Victoria. The Victorian section of the Hume is probably the best because their facilities are for us as well. But those green reflectors, I started that process in 1999, and the intent was you would see 3 green reflectors. Now, to be fair, we started with blue. They matched our parking bay signs. We tried to get the system into Victoria and Western Australia, and they said, oh, no, we use blue reflectors for hydrant posts. And I said, that's fine. You're not going to have any hydrants on the Nullarbor plain, are you? And we're not going to go and park in the middle of Melbourne. Oh, no, you've got to change. So we changed to green. We did a trial with TMR. So now it's a green reflector. It's recognised by Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, finally, South Australia. But that's taken me 22 years. And I'm admitting here that I put most of them up. I have no authority to do so, but probably every 2 or 3 months, I will get a truck driver who will ring me up and say, Rod, you saved my life. I was tired, I didn't know the road, or I was that bloody tired, I didn't know where the rest area was and I nearly missed it. And that's the intent of the reflectors. You see 3 on a guidepost, they come up on your high beam, 2 on the next, 1 on the next. Where that one is, it might only be a bit of dirt, but it has to have sufficient capacity, line of sight, and a reasonably safe entry exit. And that saves truck drivers' lives, and yet I'm still trying to get governments to support it.
Yeah, and I think kudos to you, Rod, for that initiative, because you've been doing that for a long time, and that's a practical thing you've done for your fellow truck drivers. What do we know about how the industry uses rest areas? Sort of frequency of accessing rest areas, duration of rest, number of drivers accessing them on a specific day, number of feet. Is there any data that can, support an improvement of these?
Mate, TMA did some work through TCA, and the problem is they only used trucks that are tracked with their compatible system. So virtually it was anybody on IAP or possibly HML. But that's not the majority of the industry. A lot of that might be scheduled work. Now, I'd ask you, and I'm going to put you on the spot here, what's a changeover driver do?
I don't know.
Okay. So look, when I started in the industry, you got in the truck. You were lucky if you got out of it once a week. I generally leave home here on a Sunday and get home on a Saturday, and I live in that truck 5 or 6 days a week. Sometimes it's 2 weeks, sometimes it's 3 weeks before I get home. Because of the fact that people don't want to do that now, and they don't want to live in a truck, and there's a whole other range of reasons we'll come to about logbook rules, ridiculous penalties, things that have nothing whatsoever to do road safety, for which we get $600 fines. That's a whole other ball game. But some drivers have said, no, don't want to do that, but I will drive a truck for you as long as I can get home every night. So we waited 35 years to get a changeover site built at Tarcutta. If you've ever been there in the middle of the night, it's nearly like a circus. It's that busy, it's chock-a-block, it's built on a slope. Now, if you're going to drop semi-trailers, would you drop them on a slope so they can run away because somebody forgot to put the brakes on or they hooked the hoses up too early? That happens regularly. The entry exit to it, mate, is not B-double friendly, and that's what most of the trucks are now on the road. And when they started building the Pacific Highway, 15 years ago, I wrote absolute complete lists of every suggested spot on the Pacific Highway. And I said, when you build this road, you must recognise as probably the second busiest. So the Hume, Sydney, Melbourne's probably the biggest freight volume. Sydney, Brisbane and Brisbane, Melbourne via Dubbo, where I am now, running the Newell Highway, is probably compatible in a way. So there is a large volume of trucks that run Brisbane, Sydney. There were not enough rest areas then. They spent millions of dollars, or I should say billions of dollars on that road. Many of the towns were bypassed. Now, each of those towns had a truck stop. They had a few parking spaces. They had access to food and fuel and coffee overnight if you needed to get out and have a break. Driver Reviver is another one. At one stage, there was a lot of Driver Reviver sites refused to serve truck drivers. Oh, you're a professional. You can't get a free coffee. Well, I argue against that point. But now the Pacific Highway, and I come up there 2 weeks ago, mate, and I was shocked at the number of trails off into the centre of the road where some truck driver's gone to sleep or something's happened on a road that is meant to be one of the safest in Australia. And I've got to say, it's a better road now than the Hume is for quality and for conduct. And don't get me started on the state of our roads at the moment, because not only do they cause wear and tear on our trucks, it's just exacerbated the maintenance, like through the roof, but that contributes to my fatigue. I'm trying to avoid bumps and potholes. I'm watching the car coming towards me like a hawk to make sure that he doesn't hit a pothole and swerve in front of me. And all that does is add to those levels of stress.
Oh, Rod, you're doing it again. My vicarious anxiety and stress has gone up with talking to you. It's really thank you for sharing the insights there. And I think the industry is, well, the drivers are lucky to have you advocating, but you've certainly given us a glimpse of the challenges that the truck drivers are facing. And we should all reflect on how, access to good facilities, whether that's for cooking, cleaning, washing, etc. We'd expect you to be able to have that. And for managers that are listening and supervisors in the transport industry, it's really valuable to hear what it's like out on the road. Time is moving on, Rod, and I understand that you're on a bit of a deadline as well today with having to go and pick up your truck, but I'm hoping we can get you for a few minutes at the end for a couple of questions, which I'm sure there will be. So thanks for sharing, Rod.
Cheers, mate. If I can get some support on the stockpiles, I'll be happy.
No, we could talk for a very long time. Thank you. Okay, so now I'm delighted to introduce Sue Reid. Sue is the founder and director of Life Unlimited Psychology. Sue is a registered psychologist with over 22 years of expertise in addressing the mental and physical health challenges faced by individuals in high stress and irregular work environments. Sue is a highly sought after speaker, presenter and workshop facilitator, and has a particular interest in assisting individuals and organisations to attain optimal health and sustainable work performance. Sue's signature resilience program, Boot Camp for the Brain, has been adapted for use by individuals, groups, teams and entire agencies, both nationally and internationally. As well as her interests in people, and psychology, Sue is a former elite athlete who has competed nationally and internationally in athletics. And she was also a member of the Australian national women's football team, the Matildas, and played as a goalkeeper. She was happy earlier in the week to hear about that result we had over Germany. Today, Sue will be presenting on the impact of cumulative stress on our system and how we can manage our mental, emotional and brain performance at work and at home through implementing targeted recovery and rest break strategies. Welcome, Sue. Take it away.
Thanks, Tom. And I'm feeling a bit anxious too after hearing Rod talk. So I might actually, I don't know how everyone else is feeling. It might be good actually just to take a little stretch into your body, because I know that was lots to absorb. And we do have another section of time now to delve into some other concepts. So maybe just shake things off and get ready, because this is probably quite appropriate for what we're about to talk about, which is more about how do we utilize rest and recovery. And I'm just going to pop my slides up here. So I'm hoping that they will be able to come up there. So for the time that we've got, actually, they are not the correct slides. Give me one moment. We did say no matter how much preparation we do, this was probably going to happen. And just while I'm bringing these up, I will say, if you have questions, comments, thoughts as we go through, I would love to hear them as we go. I'm happy to read the questions and to be as interactive as we can, even though I can't see your lovely faces. So the focus for us in this session is really taking a little bit of time to pause and reflect on your own experience, but of course on the experience of how you support the people around you, both maybe in an office environment, but of course the truck drivers and other people in your environment, about how you can appropriately recover, repair, and reset in the time that you have. And just to give you a little bit of perspective of the avenue I come at this from, as Tom said, my background is as a psychologist. And like most psychologists, I'm interested in all areas of mental health, but I do have a particular interest in a few key areas. One is in the work-related space. So I've worked extensively with many different organizations and different professions to look at a couple of things. One is, how do we show up and sustainably perform over an extended period of time right throughout our careers? Because we do know that good work is good for us. So we want people to have meaningful work. We want to be able to engage healthily throughout that. But one big change we've all faced in a very short space of time is a real increase in the duration of our working lives, from roughly 35 years to about forever now, to about 50-year working career. And that means a few things. It means that we can't do this in a sprint mode kind of fashion, that this is a really long marathon of an engagement over our working career, along with all the other challenges that we have throughout our lives that we have to manage. And what I really see is becoming more apparent is that if we don't have really clear, conscious recovery and repair strategies for people to engage in a very thoughtful, conscious way, we do start to see impairment across the lifespan through health, performance, and relationships. And I want to delve into that a little bit more. So I'm very invested in looking at how do we help people show up, do good work, stay safe, and return home, but equally return home with an energy and a capacity to meaningfully engage in other parts of life. So it's both about performance and sustainability. The other area, there's two other areas that I think are relevant for what we're touching on today. In the field of psychology, I work in this field of what's called peak performance psychology. So that's working with people who said in irregular work environments. So it might be in the trucking or transport industry, surgeons, paramedics, fireys, police officers, hospital staff, those environments where there are many demands and pressures over either extended periods of time or in the moment, that have the capacity to push people into the very reactive centers of the brain, where people want to react, maybe from the survival center or the reptile brain. And whilst that's very understandable, it's not particularly helpful. And in many cases, and particularly in the transport industry or the mining industry, it can have really dire consequences. So what performance psychology is about is looking at what are the regular habits, tools, consistent actions that people can put in place to help do a couple of things. One is, how do we repair and recover at a brain, emotional, mental, physical level to be able to reset after intense experiences? But how does this also set us up to stay connected to the right parts of the brain to effectively concentrate, manage impulse control, and perform well under pressure? And what we know in performance psychology is there are things we can do that help us increase the probability of a good outcome. Many of the practices are often very simple. The difficult part comes to, how do we do them? How do we do them regularly and consistently? And how do we sculpt that into a challenging life where we've got lots of other demands and pressures? So I want to draw from that area of peak performance, because I think it's incredibly important when we look at this idea of how do you maximize rest and recovery in the time that you have. Again, whether you're on the road or whether you're in an office environment, how do you utilize the little periods of time? Not everyone, of course, and especially with what Rod was saying, there's not always the facilities, the time, the capacity to go to the gym for an hour or to, have 6 hours to spend on self-care. The reality is you might have 6 minutes, 8 minutes, 10 minutes to invest some strategies in place to really start to reset the brain and the body and the nervous system. And what we really know is consistent practices done regularly can have a very profound impact. And because people don't have a huge amount of spare time, I'm really interested in what helps us switch off as rapidly as we can in the time we have biologically, so we can then bounce back and switch on when we need to switch on. So that's what I want to draw on today. The other area which I think is quite relevant, and I do want us to spend a little bit of time on, is really recognizing, for myself and everyone in my practice, we all specialize in this field of what's, I guess, dealing and recovering from not just acute stress, but recovering from chronic stress and burnout. And there's this whole new field in psychology now, a new diagnosable category of burnout. And what we've seen in these last few years, and particularly relevant, as Justin was saying, the transport industry, the whole country has relied on the transport industry right throughout the pandemic. And people have increased load, taken on more, adapted, adjusted, dealt with all the challenge and demand at work and at home. But what we're seeing kind of 4 years in is a lot of people being very depleted. So moving into spaces of now chronic stress or chronic burnout. And this can have really profound impacts on how well people can show up and perform, and certainly on mental and physical health. And the other element of this is I specialize in the field of trauma as well. So helping people recover and repair from more traumatic circumstances that people might have gone through. And what I like about this field of psychology is we do understand that when we go through difficult times, either acute difficult times or more chronically challenging periods of life, of course it has an impact on us. So it can impact every layer of our being. What this field of burnout and stress recovery and trauma recovery teaches us is that there are particular strategies and tools and techniques that can help us more effectively adapt and recover and repair. But it's not as simple as saying time heals all wounds, or thinking that just because events have been happening in the past, 3 years ago, a year ago, 20 years ago, just because time has elapsed, it doesn't mean we automatically repair and recover. So whether you're trying to recover from a difficult shift or a difficult week, like Rod said, or 4 years of pandemics, hailstorms, floods, long work hours, locust plagues, who knows what was going to be thrown at us next. When we accumulate all these different challenges in our life, we actually have to put certain steps in place to really deeply help us heal, recover, and reset to create more energy to deal with what's to come next. And I don't want to fill you with too much hope that the world is going to get any less crazy anytime soon. I think we've seen this increase in pace of life, increase in rate and demands and pressures. I think what that really challenges us to think about is how do we cultivate times where we step back and really deeply repair and recover emotionally, mentally, physically, and I would say at a brain level. Then we need to work out in the time we have, where do we need to invest our time and energy? What are the highest value areas of our life? And how do we come back and engage meaningfully in that? And one of the helpful things with this research we see is that when we step back to repair and recover in the time we have, not only do we perform better at work, obviously, but we actually improve the well-being of the people around us. And on average, when we appropriately rest and recover, the well-being of the people around us, whether that's family or work environment, their well-being increases on average by 42% when we put consistent practices in place around recovery. So the way I think about it is when I go to the gym, I just harm less people. And I think that's actually quite a good thing for the world. So I'm just going to touch on some of these principles. Like I said, I want to give some key concepts, and then I really want to do a little bit of practical work today. So I'm going to be encouraging you to do the exercises and the practices to notice the impact it has so that you can better take that back into your own lives, but of course into influencing the people that you work with and live with. And I think for me, the other real avenue that's very informative when we think about how do we use rest breaks, how do we use rest times appropriately, is I really draw on my experience in the elite physical environment. And Tom is right. I didn't have to yell at the TV quite as much this week because the Matildas won, which is great. But I spent quite a lot of my life, my early years in that elite physical environment. And what we really learn in the world of physical and elite sports performance is that if we want to sustainably show up and perform well, day after day after day, year after year, it is directly related to our capacity to efficiently and effectively switch off and deeply recover in the time that we have so that we can bounce back, integrate the experience, and be fitter, faster, stronger next time we show up to a stimulus. Now, we know if we under recover in the sporting environment, we see these declines in performance very rapidly. And so most of the major advancements in sport actually are how do we recover more rapidly? They are not all legal methods and offline if you want some idea. No. So the things that we really focus on is looking at what are the controllables that we can measure and manage and influence. So of course, it's things like managing what we eat, managing how we sleep and how we transition into sleep, real basics like hydration. Very importantly, it also gets down to managing mental worry and mental load and stress. And we know if we can't appropriately manage our mind and our mental world, we see these declines in performance. Now, what I see moving into working with people in a range of different work environments is most of us expect ourselves to perform well. We want to show up, we want to perform day after day after day, and not just for 10 or 15 years, like a sporting career might be at top level. We've got these really extended marathons of these working lives. And typically what I see is when work hours blow out, more demands, more challenges, more unexpected things that we have to deal with, which also seem to be coupled with relationship challenges, financial pressures, kids being sick, parents having challenges in the workplace. For some reason, they all happen at the same time. We want to do well, but when we start to get stretched in a multitude of different areas all at the same time, what most of us start to do is we really negotiate away our core recovery strategies. So we start, and so these things that we know are related to performance, we erode them away and we put them to the bottom of the list. And now we do know as humans, we are pretty resilient. We are able to push through, and at times we've got to grit it out and get through. But what I'm really seeing is if we continue to push and push and push with inadequate reprieve, we see performance declines show up in 3 different areas of life, and it's almost inevitable. And look, I don't want to lie, the last few years has been great for business in psychology because many people have been adapting and adjusting and dealing and coping and trying to get through. But particularly the resilient people have pushed so hard for so long, they're really starting to hit that chronic stress and burnout phase. And what I see in Australia is we are pretty good at pushing hard, and certainly certain industries where we think we should be able to push through no matter how we kind of take care of ourselves. What we see is we push and push and push until we hit that breakdown point and that crisis point. And I would say not only have I experienced this myself, but I also work with too many people at that crisis end of the spectrum. And of course, we want to help people at crisis point, whether it's in a work environment or a psych environment or physical injury. But we all know that when we are dealing at the crisis end of the spectrum, the investment of time and money and energy and resources and time off work is phenomenally larger than if we can invest in prevention and early intervention strategies. And that's why part of what I'm going to ask you to reflect on today is to take stock, even for yourself as a practice, and notice where are you sitting in the context, energy-wise, of all the different things that have been happening in your life at the moment. I think as Justin and Tom said, that we are moving into, we've had all our public holidays. It's probably been a big year for everyone. We're now moving into this very busy time of year, and certainly in the transport industry, where we're meant to ramp up, but there hasn't often been that adequate time to recover and repair. And so what I really see is if we can do anything to prevent or check in and notice what our energy level's at. And I think we've just got a poll up there at the moment to get you to reflect on where your energy is at the moment. If we can do anything to reset ourselves a day earlier than tomorrow or a day earlier than next week, we see a much better trajectory of repair and recovery. And I'll bring up a slide to do with these energy levels. The energy check-in, we'll come back to the performance in a moment, but we often talk about managing time and not having enough time. I would say we manage 3 different commodities at the moment. One, of course, is time. But the other 2 things incredibly important for performance in different areas of life is that we are constantly managing our energy and our concentration and mental focus. And whether you're in an office-based environment or people out on the road, we are trading in concentration and attention. And when energy levels are depleted, we necessarily impair our brain performance. And what we see when energy gets depleted is we don't always have access to the full higher order parts of our brain. We often reroute from the high order connected parts of the thinking brain here back to what we think of as our survival-based reptile brain, which is all about survival and not dying. That can be great at certain times, but it's usually not the space we want to be operating from day to day for long periods of time. When energy is depleted, we start to impair functioning like impulse control, complex problem-solving skills. The ability to concentrate for sustained periods of time gets very impaired. The way I kind of think about it in terms of the other brain areas that get impacted is understanding that when energy levels are depleted, we all start to look like very tired 2-year-olds. And I don't know if anyone's been around a tired 2-year-old or if you've been a tired 2-year-old lately. But tired 2-year-olds aren't great at regulating their well-being. So they're hungry and they definitely won't eat anything you give them. They're tired and they won't sleep, and their emotions typically spurt out everywhere. Now, when we are under recovering, these are some of the changes we see in terms of poor emotional regulation and poor needs regulation. We don't take care of the basic needs. And yeah, I'm very interested to hear from the 8 people who are at 80 to 100%. Wherever you're at, and also in the 1 to 40%, but wherever you're at on that energy check-in, it's important data. And I think what we rarely give ourselves time to do, and this is part of the importance of building in conscious rest times, is when we step back from the data-driven, overwhelming overstimulation of daily life and really tune in to notice where we're at. When we check in with where our basic energy levels are at, it helps us start to reflect and get some data and understanding, where am I at? What are the factors that have impacted and led me to where I'm at this point in time, whether it's low energy or high energy? And this important component, which is what we think of as self-compassion, is about asking, given where I'm at and what's been happening, what strategies do I need to implement to reboot my energy? Now, part of the purpose of rest breaks, of weekends, of holidays, of times in our life where we take a break away from daily life is to completely reboot our energy and refill our stocks so we understand how we perform when we're feeling pretty healthy. Equally understanding if there's people in the 1 to 40% category, like for me, that's that sense of waking up in the morning and going, I don't know how I'm going to get through the day. I feel like I was run over by a truck during sleep. I just need to inject caffeine directly into my veins and crawl into the workplace. That sense of being really depleted, it's important data because it means there's not much left in the tank. And if there's steps not put in place pretty quickly, we're going to see a whole range of changes in the way that we show up. Similarly, anything under about that 60% mode at the moment, when we think about the busy time moving into, that's important data. And I'll be starting to ask, what's been impacting for you to be in that place? What are some of the important, simple strategies you might be able to put in place to reset? If you need to nap for the rest of this session, I would totally understand that. Equally, though, for the people in the higher ends, maybe 80, 90, 100%, which is wonderful, really important to ask, what have I been doing that's been helping me reboot my energy? Can I do more of that? What helps that? If you've had a holiday and you come back and you're rebooted, great. Very often now I see people take a break from work, they come back and they're not actually rejuvenated, and that gives us other important data. So part of the thing about these rest breaks and rest times is really recognizing what we do in those rest times fundamentally has to be about how do we reboot our energy physically, emotionally, mentally, obviously with nourishment and hydration, and particularly with strategies through the body. And I mentioned this before that when we under recover, we see declines in performance. The declines in performance that I would see, I think they show up in 3 different areas. One is in work-related performance. And we'll come back to that in a moment. The other 2 areas we see change is when we push and push and push, we take on a stress, we under recover, push a bit more, under recover, is we start to see changes in our physical and mental and emotional health. And it's not simple anymore. When we push and push and push and we don't have adequate recovery and take care of our core biological needs, what we're really starting to see are these chronic, creeping, cumulative inflammatory conditions in people's systems. So it's not getting a cold, taking a couple of days off, coming back. It's getting chronic gut issues, migraines, occupational overuse injuries from stress, elevating shoulders, back pain, musculoskeletal injuries. We keep triggering the stress response, which creates more inflammation in our body. And when we do that, that starts to creep up the risk of immune system problems, diabetes, cancer, heart disease, stroke, these things that you don't see initially. You might notice a tiny change, but it might take months or years, but then all of a sudden, we are in a crisis, chronic, overwhelming stress point or health mode. And that's that importance of bringing inflammation out of the system for us to adequately repair and recover. Of course, if we push too hard for too long, one of the things we see happens is our mood changes, our brain functioning changes. We become about 500% better at being negative and seeing the negative and being more hypervigilant to the world. And we do become more prone to depression, anxiety, or to burnout. And burnout we really define as and think about it being the impact of doing too much for too long and overwhelming the system with inadequate reprieve. There is a particular component of burnout which is about emotional burnout. So we haven't had time to clear the decks emotionally that really starts to impact us. So we see these psychological changes, physical changes, work performance changes. The third area I think we see change is you might have got through a whole day, you might have had a hard week, either on the road or away. And I'm sure you've all experienced this. You get through the whole day or the whole week, then you get home and we turn to those people that we apparently love. And when we're exhausted and tired, we don't always show up as our best selves. We walk in the door, or these days you might just turn from the laptop to the people in your environment, and all of the managing emotions during the day and being an adult that you've done all goes out the window, and we kind of express not our best selves in that environment. So our relationships start to get affected. And again, our relationships can tolerate a certain amount, but if we push too hard for too long, we start to see the breakdowns there. And as I said, I really see people at that crisis end of the spectrum. So we're thinking, what are the warning signs and symptoms on the lead up to that? Because if you're a normal human and you're going through periods of sustained stress, you will start to see changes. And I'm going to ask you, and I do just want you to pop some things in the chat function here. When people start to under recover, become overwhelmed, become too emotionally distressed, what are some of the changes we might see in work performance, whether it's truck drivers, whether it's in your environment? Just want you to see if you can pop in there what changes in how we show up, how we relate, how we perform. Yeah, and I just saw the comment from Angela there about fluid intake and hydration. Yeah, that's massive. And I think taps into Rod's points earlier about appropriate rest stops or rest breaks. Even minor levels of dehydration have a huge impact on brain performance, but also risk of musculoskeletal injuries. Every cellular reaction in the body requires appropriate hydration. And this is a bit like teachers. They will often minimize their hydration because they can't get to the toilet. That has a huge impact. So I think that's something definitely need to be thinking about. Yeah, so some of the changes we might see, disengaged, short-tempered, impatience. We might see inattention. So concentration is impaired, memory issues, more difficulty concentrating and focusing on a specific task. Absolutely. And the big problem is like splitting attention to too many places. We get overwhelmed and then we lose concentration. Angela, you're spot on. We make more errors and the parts of the brain that see that we've made a mistake aren't online. So we make a mistake and someone else notices it and then we feel worse. Brain fog, we change how we process stress. I think that's what Michael's saying. The lack of quality thought processes. And as I said, we actually start to interpret the world more negatively. And when we are more stressed, we really move back into this survival space where we're hyper vigilant. We're looking for fear, threat, and danger, which sometimes is important. But if we overdo it, it can spiral us down into a very negative space. And yeah, thanks, Rod. The less tolerance, the emotional regulation centers go offline very quickly. And we actually see, I would say we see this show up on the roads most these days where people feel safe to let out their irritability, crankiness, impatience, intolerance, their entire, if you watch people in the car and what they're saying, it's not nice, but they're letting out all of their reptile self. The emotional regulation centers go offline really quickly. And Rachel, thank you. This is the other really big thing. When we think about it, our workplaces at some level are really about maintaining relationships. Even like Rob was saying, when a driver's had a hard week and maybe alone for a lot of that time, the support offered by other people is an incredibly important way to de-stress. But when we're stressed, our stress brain favors two forms of relationship management, neither of which are particularly helpful for good relationships. Our stress brain favors either silence or violence. So when we get overwhelmed relationally, we want to shut down, withdraw, go to our cave, disappear. Or for some of us, we want to escalate, talk more, throw more, swear more, be physically violent. These are very understandable, but not particularly helpful for relationship management. So we can often feel more isolated or more disconnected. And we lose perspective. Small obstacles become really big obstacles. And all of this actually relates to understanding that when we're not taking care of basic needs and energy and we get overwhelmed, our system adapts and rewires by going, you know what, this high order brain, it uses a ton of energy. Let's really wind things down, move into the reactive brain. Actually, I'll show you, this is probably a better way of seeing it. Just flip to this slide. Got a picture of the brain. I'll show you what we actually see when we do brain scans of people. It's maybe not exactly spot on, but we do have these three distinctly different brains. The reactive brain or survival brain, when we are not hydrated, when we're not feeding ourselves well, when we're not taking care of connection, sunlight, sleep, we can really disconnect from the high order cortex and reroute back to this survival center. And then we see all of the symptoms that you've put on there. And this inability to self-regulate, have social awareness, keep perspective, impulse control, concentration, problem solving, of course, they're all the skills we need to manage our complex world. So for me, understanding recovery, and Rachel, very happy to share the slides as well. I've, of course, prepared about 6,000 slides, of which we'll get through about 4. But if we don't understand the real context that how we recover and switch off directly impacts which part of the brain we are connected to and how we perform, I think we just see these as nice, warm, fuzzy, nice to have things, and we don't do them. And I think, understanding the limited capacities and rest areas and other tools, I'm really interested with what people can do, and especially truck drivers, but anyone in any work environment. What can you do with the least amount of equipment and particularly the body to be able to repair the systems in the times you have, bring your body to a state of rest and the brain to a state of rest so we can reconnect with the higher order parts of the brain to respond rather than react. And I think, yeah, and Andrew, you're really right. Like this relational change that happens creates a really vicious cycle. We get more conflict, or if you're someone who goes into violence mode when you're feeling stressed, you look pretty scary and people back away. So we then feel like no one supports me. I'm here by myself, or we feel ashamed of what we've done. And then we certainly feel more alone and more worry. We get more negative and we can spiral downwards. And a really important point of what you've mentioned there is when we think about recovery, just going to pop. I forget how slow Teams is on moving slides, so apologies for that. When we think about recovery, if we're thinking about what can people do effectively to really reboot their system, sleep, of course, is the fundamental element of this, of absolutely anyone on shift work, driving, irregular schedules, and actually just living in the world today with our 24-hour kind of cycle of screens. Sleep, I would say, is the most impaired area of our health these days, and it's the most profound one. If we are now a nation of chronic undersleepers, there's many reasons from this, from the stimulants we take, from caffeine and other substances, the screens that we are on, the mix-up of circadian cycles that tends to happen. But I would say one of the biggest impairments that stop us sleeping is not enough time to appropriately reflect and unhook and manage our own mind and actually make space to process the emotions that come up. So very often when we've had a hard day, we will have triggered a bunch of difficult stuff internally. If you haven't had time to appropriately reflect, reset, nurture, look after that, chat to someone, debrief by yourself, then our mind and our emotional system need space to do that. If we don't do it, our mind will find time when we're trying to get to sleep, or it will wake us up sometime during the sleep cycle to have time to reflect. And I think just really understanding that we can't go from 100% switched on to deep rest without some kind of transitional process. And so sleep's critically important. It's very strongly tied to the hydration and nutrition, but very importantly, how do we transition from a stress state where we have an overwhelming mind, which will tend to reflect on the negatives of the past and the worries of the future? How do we manage that to bring us into a state of deep rest? Yeah, brilliant. And Sarang was just saying you do 25 minutes of intense work behind a computer, 5 to 10 minutes of non-work or different intensity, like a walk, doing something else to bring the focus cycle back on. And Sarang, I would 100% agree with that. At best, while staring at a screen, you've got about, at best, 45 minutes of concentration, maybe 25 minutes. If we can purposefully carve up time to concentrate, then step back and reset, then concentrate and reset, we do more work with less negative impact and better sustained concentration. Of course, with these, with drivers, these really sustained periods of concentration are really challenging, which means the deep rest in the time they have is critically important. Yeah, great. Thanks for these comments. Thanks, Rod. Push-ups, breathing exercises, reading as opposed to listening to audiobooks. I don't know if you're reading whilst driving or when you've stopped driving, but maybe clarify. Multi-talented. But the sleep trigger at night, 100% agree. If you can read a book, movement, breath work, they're the absolute key skills to start to re-regulating. So I'm going to try and say a couple of concepts here. Because we obviously need 6 hours together to go through all of these things. Taking time out, whether it's like Sarang was saying, or like Rod was saying, to step back from the busyness and pause and reflect, to reset the system, helps us both start to manage the mind and process our emotions. And I think really reflecting on the way we live and work now, there is rarely time for us to turn inwards and properly pause and reflect. And part of conscious recovery is recognizing just sitting on your phone scrolling and shoveling food in at the same time or distractedly doing something else, it's not enough of a recovery strategy. If we're talking about maximizing performance and well-being, and they go together really well, we need to have conscious, purposeful recovery strategies. And they necessarily need to involve the body. And like Rod's beautifully written there, is your body is one of the best tools you have to start to clear stress out of the system, to refocus the mind, and to reset the stress pathways. Yeah, thanks, Andrew. The mind and emotion management isn't something that many men have a chance historically to think about. And I actually find the men that I work with are the ones that take to it the most because they're really good, empowering tools. And maybe actually if there's something to take away from today, try and remember this. Do not believe everything you think, because what we think is not always true. It's rarely helpful, and it's not always a true reflection of reality, especially when we're in a more depleted state. The job of the mind is to help us not die, and the way it helps us not die is it beats us up in a recrimination kind of way of reflections of how we've stuffed up in the past, and it tries to take those learnings into the future, but often in a hyper anxiety kind of way, to worry about all the things that are going to go wrong in the future. And the thing for us as humans is we don't need real stress to trigger stress. We just need to think about something that we thought happened in the past or might happen in the future, and we can trigger a full-blown stress response in our system. So there's real stresses, then there's the amplification of stress through our thoughts. And this mind management component of being able to unhook from the past and the future, I think is a key tool to deal with the future, but actually be able to get into sleep and deep rest. And so when I'm talking about rest, I'm really talking about how do we flick and switch your system from what we traditionally think of as the stress part of the nervous system, known as the sympathetic nervous system, where we're triggering that fight, flight, freeze, fawn response. And this is where we trigger or perceive threat or danger. Obviously, in the past, it was real life or death. Now it might be actual life or death on the road, or emails, deadlines, demands, work stresses, conflict. The thing for us now is we have a multitude of different things to pay attention to that will often over trigger us into this stress response. And I'm not saying that stress is bad for us. We are designed to deal with stress as humans, but we are a bit better at dealing with quite acute periods of stress where stress that looks like this, acute periods of stress where we have peak periods and then recovery, peak and recovery. If we can manage our days, our weeks, our months where we've got peak acute concentration happening, we deal with life, we deal with stresses, that's okay as long as we build in little periods of repair and recovery. What we're not so good at dealing with is this more chronic, creeping, cumulative, overwhelming stress mountain where we do a shift, we don't fully recover, we take on something else, we don't fully recover. We've got events and demands and pressures that creep up over time with insufficient recovery regularly. If you're a normal human and you're more in this kind of pattern, we will see a whole range of changes. And again, and I think we've got a word cloud on this, and I'm going to ask you just to pop in again what we might see more broadly, not just at work, but elsewhere. But I want you to think about what happens for you specifically when you get into states of cumulative chronic stress and overwhelm where there's not adequate recovery. And we might see that we get more tired, fatigued, lose concentration, we get gut issues, we get physical pain, we get those relational changes that we talked about. We are much more likely to get hooked and caught in negative thinking patterns. So we take things more personally. Yeah. Yeah. Do you eat more, eat less, rely on more stimulants, lose appetite altogether, drink more, drink less? Do you withdraw from relationships or over-engage? Some of the others here are the really big one, I think an important warning sign of burnout, impaired cognition, but also this feeling of numbness. So loss of motivation, loss of engagement, loss of pleasure. And so when we think about rest, we're really thinking, how do we move back into the opposite of the stress response? Yeah, the inability to experience joy. When people flag that, for me, it tells me you're a lot further along the pathway into that where we've been over triggering the stress response for too long. And for us, like when we're thinking about recovery and this good question about what we can do in a 15-minute rest break, we're really trying to flick the switch from these stress pathways, which cumulatively will lead to these symptoms, into facilitating us moving into the opposite of the stress response. Now, the opposite of the stress response, which is called, well, it's the parasympathetic nervous system, but I think a more helpful way of thinking about it is it's our pause and pleasure system and our rest and digest system. So for us to kind of recover, so all of these symptoms that people have put up are really normal. What we don't want is to normalize them and to have them be there longer term. Otherwise, we see these changes in each of those areas of our life. And so what I'm going to touch on here in terms of what we can do, if we really want to flick the switch, I'm just going to move that from my screen. The key principles of kind of recovery and stress recovery is recognizing we first have to re-regulate the nervous system. If you've been experiencing these symptoms and we're getting out of balance, we are over triggering in the stress response. We get out of sequence in circadian rhythms and all the brain pathways we talked about. To re-regulate, we have to re-regulate the nervous system through re-regulating the breath. So the shifting from short, shallow breathing, which escalates the heart and puts us more into survival mode. When we exhale more deeply, when we start to slow down the breath, we're signifying that we're safe and it's time to move into rest and repair. And a very simple example, if you want to maximize the nourishment you get at a rest area, even if you can't control what you eat, how you eat is just as important as what you eat. So even being able to slow down, take 4 to 8 deep breaths to tell the brain, I'm no longer in stress mode. I'm now in rest and digest mode. If you mindfully eat and even chew your food, which is another important thing to do, and move into the right part of the nervous system, we have a better capacity to utilize the energy from what we eat to transfer the sugar into the bloodstream to feed the brain. If we are eating whilst we're stressed, we are not digesting food. And you'll shovel it in, it'll sit and rot in your tummy, which gives gut issues, especially if you're then seated and driving. And then you tank 2 hours later. Concentration will tap out. If all you've got is time to eat, can you slow the breath down? Can you mindfully notice what you're eating? And eating is about many things. It's about nourishment, it's about reflection, it's about emotional digestion, and it is about bringing energy into the brain. The other part of regulation is moving the body out of the stress-related postures. So when we are stressed, we hold emotions and show them in our body. So, and I'm sure if I asked you if I could see you all and I said, show me what we look like when we're depressed, which I will ask you to do, you would very quickly know that we slouch our body, our head comes down and we're very forward folding. This is how we spend on average 14 hours of our day. Whether you're driving or in front of a computer, we are in postures that are more depressed, disengaged, demotivating, and these bring on very negative thinking patterns. Our body and our posture is a really important signifier for clearing the stress response out. And the only signal to your system that stress is done is movement and breath. And if we think about it, in the past, we'd trigger stress because there was a real threat and we either had to fight or run, or if we couldn't do either of those, we would deeply freeze the body. But essentially, when we trigger stress, we're getting ready to do one thing, and that's to mobilize physical resources. The challenge now in our world is most of us are in sedentary-based, mentally demanding or emotionally demanding jobs, and we never clear the stress response, and so we don't deeply recover and repair. So if we're talking about what can you do in 15 minutes, we have to move the body out of this shutdown posture. We have to re-regulate the breath from short, sharp, shallow, which signifies stress, to, and there's hundreds of different breathing exercises, and I'm happy to send lots of different ones through. The second part of this kind of recovery is recognizing we don't actually heal completely in isolation from other humans. When we have the chance to relate compassionately in a connected way, to check in, to debrief, or to have someone notice us or acknowledge what we've been through or how hard things are, that kind of lets us say, you know what, I've reconnected with my tribe. The immediate stress is over. And we need a bit of a balance, between it, particularly when you've got limited rest area time. Sometimes if there's anyone around, you need to connect with someone. Do you need to connect with someone on the phone? Equally understanding the support from workplaces or organizations to check in with people. That's a key way to start to complete the stress cycle. Yeah, great. And you like to do the Superman or Superwoman pose while taking deep breaths for about 5 minutes to help re-regulate. Great. Thanks, Andrew. So I'm going to say a couple of things, and I actually want to, if we can, before we get kicked off, do a little bit of practice. Thing I learned from sport is if you want to make any change, particularly obviously this rest leads to performance and switching off to switch on, is anything you can do in a routine, disciplined, regular way, it will have profound impacts. So stress builds up and accumulates over time. Stress is only a problem if we don't clear it out. And you might not think that 5 minutes of movement or 5 minutes of breathing once or twice a day will do much. 5 minutes of breathing and dedicated movement and emotional check-in 365 days of the year makes a very profound change to the way we re-regulate our system. And the things I like to think about, we know our brain adapts, our emotions adapt, our body adapts, depending on the behaviors we put in place. So, and just like elite sport, I think truck driving particularly, and actually office-based work, sitting is hard. Truck driving is elite sport because you have your body and your brain and your concentration to work on. And that's essentially exactly like elite physical endeavors, is you've got to be thinking, if you don't look after your brain health, emotional health, physical health, mental health, you can't do your job. So we really have to think about these non-negotiables that you can put in place. So we are just going to see. I'm going to say if we want to manage this, we need to have a movement management plan and a breath regulation plan. So I'm actually going to ask you to stand up. So wherever, and I can't see you, so I'm really hoping you are doing this, because someone asked, what can we do in a short space of time? And I think that's a really important thing to be able to check in on. So I'm going to ask you to stand up, and we're just going to do a couple of things, and maybe we can chat about this a bit more in the panel, to look at what can we do, particularly when we've been sitting for a period of time. And I don't know whether I can unshare my screen here to make me bigger. Tom or Mel, I don't know if you're able to do that. Oh, there we go. I will stop presenting for a second. So we're just going to ask you to stand up, and oh, we can only see Tom. But anyway, and I don't know if anyone's got a little mammal at home, not your partner, but like an actual dog or a cat. If you do, you will know that every other mammal, when they've been sitting for a period of time, they get into their body and they stretch. So I'm just going to ask you to take a really big stretch into the body. And if you have been sitting, and certainly being on the road with all the vibrations through the hands and the body and everything, this movement and opening up the body is really key. I'm also going to ask you to pretend you're a puppy dog that just got out of the ocean, and we're going to try and shake the water off of the system, off the body, which you have to do near a human and make them super wet as well. But for all humans, we get rid of acute stress through shaking the body. The other thing, we're just going to do a couple of gentle movements and breath regulation practices that help us combat some of this shutdown posture. So I'm going to ask you, and Tom's going to be our little model as well. He told me he put pants on today. We're yet to see it, but we're going to bring our feet fairly close together. We're going to clasp the fingers together and turn the palms down. We're going to hold our focus on a single point in front of us. And as we take a breath in, we're going to raise the arms up towards the sky or the ceiling and come up onto the toes. And just notice what happened to the breath as you did this. Often under any kind of little bit of pressure, we hold the breath. As we breathe out, we're going to lower down. We're going to do that again. So we're going to take a breath in and extend right up. And we're going to think about really stretching up through the hips, the waist, extending the spine and the back of the neck as we reach up. If you've got really good balance, just try closing one eye. Lower back down. And something our body loves to re-regulate is repetition. So we're just going to try that 33 more times to get a bit. We'll try it 2 more times. We're going to take a breath in, but the way we get rid of mental tension is actually through the physical body. So emotions and thoughts usually get held in the physical body. Breathe out as we come down. So if we want to clear it out, we really do have to bring some movement into place. We're going to do that one more time. Deep breath in, let the belly and the ribs expand. Again, we can make this more difficult just by closing one eye or both eyes if you've got excellent balance. Take a breath out as we lower down. And the feet are close together. Yep. Thanks, Carla. Going to give that a shake. And it doesn't matter. It could be far apart, but close together, it just makes it a bit harder. We're going to do a couple of other very simple movements in the time we have. We're going to do a very gentle forward bend and backward bend. So the feet are about shoulder width apart, reasonably close, knees slightly bent. We're going to pop the hands just above the knees and do your best angry cat impersonation. So we're going to press the shoulder blades and the spine towards the ceiling, draw the belly in. It's quite a proactive curl here. For a gentle backward bend, we're going to let the tummy and chest move towards the floor. Take the head and shoulders up towards the ceiling and do your best happy dog impersonation. So we're arching the back. You can wiggle your tail if you like. Find someone to sniff, whatever works, just arching the back. And then one more time in the opposite direction, really curling, curling, curling. We're going to use the hands just to walk the body back upright. Give that a shake. And we hold quite a lot of emotional tension through the back of the waist and through here. See, your cat wants to follow you. Exactly. She's like, why are you sitting staring at that computer for so long? We're going to take the feet a bit wider than hip width apart. We're going to tuck the hips under. We've got 2 more movements, Tom, so hopefully you'll get a chance to do that. We're going to pop a hand on the waist, and with the other hand, as we take a breath in, we're going to extend right up towards the ceiling. Then we're going to extend as we breathe out, up and over, like you're trying to reach the corner of the ceiling. Now, we're not gritting this out. It's almost like someone's gently elongating the body. So we breathe out, we extend a little further. And as we bend the knees, we're going to come out of this, we're going to roll forward, come up through the center. Going to pop a hand on the other side and to take a breath in, we're going to extend up. We breathe out, we elongate, and we're really imagining breathing into the top side of the ribs and the waist here. Breathing out as we extend a little further. We take that an extra breath out, we roll forward, bending the knees, coming up through the center. So we've done a little bit of spinal elongation, side to side, forward bend, backward bend. The last spinal movement, which is really important to reinvigorate mental concentration and attention, and in fact, to take neurotransmitters from the tummy up to the brain and oxygen and blood flow, is spinal rotation. So for this one, we're going to link our breath. Even without doing deep breath work, we can start to re-regulate the breath by syncing it with the movement. So here, as we take a breath in, we're going to open the arms up. As we breathe out, we're going to rotate to your right and turn behind as we wrap the arms around the body. So we look behind. This gives quite a good massage for the spinal nerves that regulate brain and body. It helps move oxygen and blood flow back to the brain. We breathe in as we open up. We breathe out. Rotate around. One more time each side, we open up. Slightly deeper breath, we breathe out. Take to the other side. Breathe in and we open the body, expand up. We breathe out. Breathing in. Expand, let the arms rest. And of course, whenever we think about having a break, our mind will usually tell us we don't have time. Even 30 seconds of continuous movement can make a big difference. And we're actually going to do 20 seconds with the time, but we're just going to do that movement again continuously for 20 seconds, a little more fluidly before we finish. So it's just going to look like we're doing a TikTok video together. We're going to record this, but the knees are bent and as fast or as slow as you like. The breath is just nice, regular, natural rhythm. Got about a minute to go of practices. We're just going to slowly put that down. Just bringing the feet about comfortable distance apart, shoulder width apart. And I'm just going to ask you to, we're just going to take 4 deep sighs together, 4 deep breaths. So I'm going to take a breath in through the nose. I'm going to allow the belly and the ribs and the chest to expand. So we're going to breathe in. Pause and 3 more times. Deep breath in through the nose. Expanding the ribs and the chest, a slight pause and a deep exhalation. 2 more times. Last breath in together, breathing in through the nose. Let the tummy expand, the ribs and the chest expand. And noticing how that feels. And then just bringing a bit of warmth into the palms of the hands. Just going to ask you to take the warmth of the hands to wherever you feel like your body needs a little bit of attention. So might be a little bit of holding or tightness, tension. Finally, bringing some warmth into the palms of the hands, and this time we're just going to take the warmth of the palms and pop it completely over the eye sockets. So if you have glasses, just pop them on the head. We get so much overwhelmed through the visual field, concentration and stimulation on the outside world. This practice of what's called palming can give the eyes and the optic nerve and the brain a complete break and a complete reset in a very short period of time. Normally throughout the day, if we were to do this, we'd hold them there until there's no more little flashes of light, no more little stimulations happening behind the eyelids. Just blinking the eyes into the palms of the hands. Warm the eyes and the brain up, taking the biggest stretch you can into the body. And do not do this while driving. Thank you, Todd. That's definitely more of a rest area one. And just taking a look around you, particularly if you can see outside, and just naming and noticing one thing you can see, particularly in the natural environment if you can. Noticing one thing you can physically feel. Maybe air on the skin, clothes touching the body. Seeing if you can notice one distinct sound in the environment. Noticing one thing you can smell. And seeing if you can notice one thing you can taste. Any remnant, any sensation of taste. Just noticing and observing how you feel. And to finish, I'll just ask you to pop into the chat function any observations. What you notice after just kind of 6 minutes of standing, a little bit of movement, 4 breaths, a little bit of redirecting the mind. Any observations at all? Tom, how was that for you?
So I was just going to type in, but my very unflexible is how I feel. Thank you. Just that little bit of movement. Yes.
Yeah. The people feeling clear, energized, refreshed. And I'd ask us to notice if you felt from a brain level more reactive or a little more responsive, more alert or more tired. And very often when we tune into our body, we might notice tiredness and stiffness and soreness. And the question I'd then be asking is, what do I need to do to look after that? How do we take care of that? But if you do feel like you could have, significant change in your body, more relaxed, energized, and ready, great. But all we were doing very quickly there was redirecting our mind from the past and the future into the present to notice how we are really feeling, which allows us then to take care of it better. Now, I know there's a million more things I could share, but Tom, you're about to press delete and stop on me. So I will hand over to you. I'm going to pop one thing on here as you chat.
Thank you, Sue. Excellent presentation, and I'm tempted to, let it go on. Thank you for providing everyone here with practical tips on how to improve and maintain our well-being, especially in high stress and, as you say, irregular work environments. And I think that's there are a number of workplaces you suggested that are irregular. That's the clearest presentation I've seen that links the brain and the body. And so that was excellent. I think everyone here, this is a transport forum, but I'm looking forward to seeing truckies on the side of the road doing this. But I think all of us can take something away in our not only our work life but personal life as well. So could we all give Sue and Rod, please, a virtual round of applause for their contributions today? And thank you once again, Sue. Excellent.
Thank you. And Rod, I was going to try and pop up there, which I can't seem to, but I've got a little Instagram link and I do put lots of the breath practices and movement practices on there so people can have access to them. Just anytime pop onto that and I'll keep adding more up there. So
yes, and I know, Sue, you were keen on a trucking dad joke. So I'm no good as a courier driver. I just wasn't delivering the goods. Oh, I can actually sense a complete sigh by everyone. Never.
I hate that I'm laughing at that. That was quite good.
Quite sad, wasn't it? Yeah. Look, we're going to change pace a bit and go into our panel session. Rod, are you still there? I know you've got a tight timeline. You're making things very real for us from the transport industry, but I'm not sure if you're still online. But there was a question in the chat for Rod, and Rod was kind enough to let me forward them to him in due course, and he will respond. So we'll get the response to that answer. But we've also got a couple for you, Sue. Bear with me. So what are your top 3 tips, Sue, for recovery that can be done in a 15-minute rest break? If I was going to do 3 things, what should I do?
Move, purposeful movement. So whether it's a practice like we just did, there's a one other movement practice which I'll post online, which is a very simple forward bend, backward bend, breathe in, breathe out. It could be 6 minutes. Like, it took us a bit longer because I was explaining it, but movement to complete the stress cycle. So if people have been sitting and driving, there's a lot of tension, emotional stress, mental stress, so movement, re-regulate the breath, and ideally, I mean, obviously go to the toilet first, but do that prior to eating, because what that will do is move you from your sympathetic nervous system into the parasympathetic to then be ready for digestion. So if we go straight from stress and all that, and then straight into, often what I see people doing is just scrolling and eating and pushing things into the body, you're not going to maximize the benefit of the recovery time. And I'll put a few slides up here as I'm talking, just so people can see those. But that, like, being in the right part of the nervous system, which means moving from more stress down into down regulation, is what's going to help maximize the time you have. And like everyone probably just noticed then, even though most people here are professional sitters by trade, I will say, sitting for an hour and a half, 2 hours staring at a screen, it's hard work. And if you don't move, that just starts to accumulate and our concentration will just get worse and worse and worse. So if we can do that, people actually get a lot more out of their rest time in their the recovery areas. So movement, breath, and then ideally eating and hydration. But here's a few points how to maximize eating. And that's really about bringing mindful attention to the process. And the data on mindful eating is really clear about how well it helps us repair and recover more deeply, and then get 4 hours of sustained concentration. So I know when people are in rest areas, you don't always have control over what you eat. You can get a lot better nourishment out of it by changing the way you eat and the nervous system they're in.
Thank you, Sue. And another question that came through. This one was from Sarang. Sorry, the first one. Credits to Mel Weller. Thank you. Sarang, good day, Sarang. What method can be implemented to keep high focus levels at the tail end of a driving shift? That is when we see the majority of vehicle incidents.
Yes. I mean, I think, again, it's that planning and preparation. Like, all of it is about what's sleep like the night before, what's hydration like, what have you done in the rest breaks. I think this ties into Andrew's question of what's the breathing you can do to energize and increase focus when you're at that tail end. Now, with the breath, there's a huge amount of research on breath work. When we want to down regulate to calm the system, we're elongating the out breath. So these practices like what's called box breathing, breathe in for 4, hold in for 4, breathe out for 4, hold out for 4. That's a bit more to bring our system to rest. If you want to increase focus, we've actually got to do a little bit of the opposite, which is we want to increase the intensity of the inhalation, which will help bring more invigoration into the brain. So there's one called the physiological sigh, and for that one, which is an in the moment reset, and you don't have to close your eyes and sit on the side of the road. It might be. Now, this is something we do naturally to re-regulate, but we're just being more conscious about it. So we inhale into the belly, then we inhale into the chest, and quite an active breath out. I mean, fresh air is a big one, of course, so that the oxygen and blood flow depletion is what starts to impair concentration. So if we can increase some of those more intense breathing in and physiological sighs, that can help refocus. And the fresh air. The other thing is posture. Like, even when I've got long drives, which is nothing compared to what the drivers will be doing, I'm really looking at, even whilst driving, can I extend my spine? Can I, notice a few things on the road? Can I reinvigorate breath? Can I get some fresh air in there with the window down? Because it's really like how well our brain performs. It's about taking care of the biological needs. What's happening with food, hydration, nourishment, oxygen, blood flow, body. I think some people said it might be listening to a podcast or an audio book, which might keep you mentally stimulated and switched on. But I think those more invigorating breath practices can start to awaken the system. I was a weightlifter as well. And in weightlifting, you're not wanting to be chilled out. You've got a split second for maximum performance. So we'd have like smelling salts and things to be like, and you're inhaling really powerfully and the focus comes on quite intensely. Other things actually are also, and I'm assuming it's safe to do this, even just moving lymphatic fluids through the body, which like just with some tapping somewhere on the body, all coming towards the heart, that can be quite invigorating as well. Like most of these things, I'd say practice is really key. So practice, 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 and see what the impact of that is over a period of time. But invigoration, body, blood flow, spine position, if you're down like this, energy and concentration are going to change. So elongation through there.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, that's something I think you sometimes feel without realizing it's helpful. You naturally do it when you're tired. You're stretching out and undoing the window, etc. So in our pre-brief, you mentioned the concept of delayed gratification in relation to healthy options for food, etc. And then even I think more broadly towards looking at your retirement, you know, what you do now affects you later on. Can you just expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah, and I think these are some of the things I learned from sport, which was if you want to do well in any field of life, there's a few key principles you need to develop and skills. One is just definitely discipline, dedication, routine, regularity, that we've got to put steps in place regularly. But there's two concepts, one which is delayed gratification, which ties also really closely to alignment with values. And what delayed gratification is really about is recognizing to do anything good for us, like improve our health, work on our relationships, our finances, our career, or education. Your capacity to delay gratification is one of the key predictors of success. And what delayed gratification really is about being able to put off more fun stuff to do less fun stuff to have a more important outcome in the future. And at an emotional level, this really means, can we put off more comfortable feelings or energy states to sit within the moment more discomfort or uncomfortable feelings to have a more important outcome in the future? And it's interesting because when we think about health and self-care, if we do go to take a moment to do something that's good for us, a couple of things happen. One, we might feel selfish or guilty or like there's other things that are more important. But equally, to do things that are good for us, it often does take more energy. It might bring up more difficult feelings like anxiety, not feeling competent enough, going, oh, I don't want to stretch because I'll realize that I haven't done anything in 15 years. Or what will other people think about it? So delayed gratification is about recognizing firstly, what are the long-term values and goals you're working towards? And what are the in the moment activities you need to engage in order to move towards those values? Because I think in sport, we know like this, we're often working to these really long-term goals, 12 months, 2 years, 4 years away. The day-to-day practices you have to do to be good at your job, they're pretty boring. It's train, smash your body 5 hours a day, eat, sleep, train, eat, sleep, train. Don't go to parties, don't take drugs, don't do anything fun, eat, sleep, train. If you don't know why you're showing up, it becomes a real drudgery. And I think this is the other element of psychological resilience and performance, particularly around people taking care of their health, is I think everyone's got to get really clear on their value for why they're showing up. Rod is back, by the way, Tom. He's just written. So if we don't have a clear sense of our values about why do we need to take care of our health, why do we need to invest in these strategies, we're probably not going to put them in place. And what I see is people become very invested in taking care of their health once they've lost it. But unfortunately, we've often done too much damage. So for me, I lost my health pretty badly at the end of my sporting career. I was told I'd never be able to exercise or play sport again. And what I really realized is when you don't have your health, you can't show up to work and take care of your finances. You can't look after your family. You can't do fun things. Really, every other area of your life gets completely affected. So for me, it became about my non-negotiables now. Unfortunately, I have a lot of chronic conditions to manage, as lots of athletes do. If I don't prioritize those first and foremost, I can't show up and do the other important stuff. And I think we were chatting about yesterday, Tom, you've got people in the industry now working at 60, 65, 67, really long careers. At the end of that career or through that career, you want to have the energy to do fun activities, pick up your kids, travel around the world, like have fun, go to the beach, hook up your caravan trailer. Like if you don't do these regular, consistent practices, which are hard in the moment, it usually will affect really profoundly those other areas of life. But the challenging thing for us is to do anything important. It's usually pretty uncomfortable in the moment. And so we've got to be really committed to why do we need to do it to actually take those actions, if that makes sense.
Yep, certainly, and takes you back to the old saying, through pain to gain. It's got its very, very applicable. I think so there was something in there from Andrew.
Yes.
Can you see that one? So professional
Yes.
athletes. Yep. Go
Yeah,
on.
absolutely. So professional athletes often have a professionally supported and documented recovery plan. Thoughts on the workplace athlete, worker, driver. Absolutely. So these, I think people, they always say, oh, you must be so motivated. You must have been so committed. And yeah, like you've got to be dedicated. But actually, we don't perform at 100% of the time. We have a very clear regime, as Andrew said, a very supported and structured recovery plan. So we know when our peak periods are going to be. We invest in plans to hit the peak, then we build in recovery. And you don't do anything as a reaction to, it's all planned out. Now, I think so whether it's for work or for drivers or whatever you're doing that's important, you do have to step back and say, for me to show up and perform in the different areas of life that are really important, what are the habits and skills and disciplines I need to do to look after myself? And then you don't leave it to motivation. You know, be like, well, today I felt like going for a run, so I did it, but not for 364 of the other days of the year. For me, we don't rise to the level of that motivation. We fall to the level of our systems. So for me, I have a series of non-negotiables, which I've learned over time are the skills and strategies that will help reboot me, help me switch off for my life and demands and my personality. Those things and exercise and movement's probably one of the key one for mental health. But I then, at the start of each week, map that out. So whether it would be, here's what I'm going to do in this rest break. Here's what I'm doing in the evening. Here's what I'm doing in the morning. Here's what I'm doing on the weekend. Here's my quarterly check-in. If that's not mapped out, there is a very low probability that we're going to do any of it. And I work with a lot of people actually right through the pandemic. A lot of people said to me, oh, I've just worked out why I'm not exercising. Like, why? They're like, I never planned to exercise. And weirdly, I was successful at that plan. So for me, if I'm going through a busy period, I will book and pay for accountability. I'll book a trainer, I'll book a class, I'll pay not a friend, but I'll pay pay for a Pilates thing or something that says I need to do this to help balance it. So there's so much support now in terms of apps, programs, things that we can get access to. We've got to know what's important, and then we've got to structure it in. It takes a lot of energy to initially inbuild that habit. Once you've got it there and you plan it each week, it then becomes easier and easier to do. And I just know for me, I can't function, like I can't be a good psychologist, a partner, a parent, a friend, a puppy dog owner. I can't engage healthily in other life activities if I don't do my non-negotiables. And I think that's working out what works for people. And yes, Helen, you can be addicted to health. Look, anything can be a way to avoid your inner emotions. Exercise can be. And so it's about knowing, again, what's the balance that really works for you and what's the impact of what's Tom said, yeah, not a risk for you to be addicted to that. And I'll see if I can bring up here my non-negotiable list for you. Does that make sense, Tom? Did you have any sort of follow-up questions from that?
Yeah, no, perfect. Thank you. We could, like I say, there could be lots of questions, but we've got to wrap it up very shortly.
Yeah. I'll just bring up the non-negotiables because I think, that delayed gratification and values element, it is for everyone to step back and go, why do I need to put certain strategies in place? Like, what's the consequence? And we actually just aren't good we're not good at prevention activity as humans. We like to wait until things get really bad and then pay attention. I'm just going to say these days that you can pretty much guarantee some area of your life is going to be impacted if you don't have a conscious health plan. And maybe this last kind of thing to tie it together, I was going to say is just really understanding we have a very ancient biological system. We have very key needs that have to be looked after in order for us to flourish and deal with stress. If we don't take care of those needs, we get symptoms. The problem is most of the needs we have now won't automatically be nourished and taken care of in our daily life. Like none of us today will accidentally get too much exercise. We won't accidentally get the sunlight, the emotional connection, the hugs, the sleep, the hydration, the meaningfulness, the sleep, the creativity, the fun that we need unless we put some steps in place. Now, something our brain needs is consistency. It's not duration, but if we've got some little touch points where in these little rest breaks or these I think about it, micro breaks, movement and mindfulness. In a little micro break in the morning, if you're in an office environment, can you step outside, get some sunshine, re-regulate your breath with fresh oxygen? Do you connect with someone on a coffee break? Do you connect with yourself? Can we do a little bit of movement? We've taken care of a lot of our needs in a very small space of time. And I think the burden we feel now around health is we've got to implement a lot of these very natural practices that we used to easily get fulfilled in life. We've got to thoughtfully put them in place. And so my non-negotiables, like I said, I'm a pretty keyed up person. I like to work all the time, play all the time, do all the stuff. So for me, I try and put in practices that help me wind down physically and mentally at night. I know I need to exercise if I'm going to have any chance of being remotely sane and sleeping. So I populate that into the calendar. It's really inconvenient, but a lot of athletes, we end up with major gut issues. So I have to buy good food, make sure that I prep it all on the weekend, and I've got it there to take with me. And that's something, if people really want to manage their well-being and concentration well, you've really got to put some prep time in, and to have some healthy options, take them with you on the road or find the places where they've got them, because that will have a profound impact on our performance if we're not thinking about it in some way. And so these are some of the things we can kind of touch on.
Thanks, Sue. I'm sorry to interrupt. We're coming up against the clock, I'm afraid, and it's time flies. And thank you very much. That we just leave that slide there for a while. Everyone can see that, those non-negotiables. Just reflecting, and the two presenters we've had today, both very engaging and very very thought-provoking. And I think for Rod's presentation, it wasn't about admiring the wicked problem that he gave us an outline. It's about just understanding that situation and just further the challenges that the transport industry, truck drivers in particular, have in going about their everyday job just to get the basics that we take for granted. I say Rod is an advocate for that, and we know he's pushing for improvements. And then to hear from Sue to give us some tips, not only in the workplace but for our lives as well, to make us better and just to healthier, is really been really helpful, and will help us in, like I say, both our work and home lives. So thank you very much, Sue. All good things must come to an end, I'm afraid. Thanks again from all of us, and for all of you that have shared your thoughts and your insights today. For those who've been involved in the chat, it was really interesting, and they gave us a lot of opportunities to reflect. So I really hope you've taken something away from today's forum, and I know I've taken away quite a bit. So thank you. Let us know what stood out for you, please, in the chat. That'll be appreciated. So bit of housekeeping at the end, a reminder that this recording of the forum will be available on Comcare's Transport Network Forum webpage in the coming weeks. We'll put the link in the chat now for our website. And in order to ensure that this forum meets your needs and those in the future, we need your feedback. This will shape how we deliver and what the content is on the forums, and provide input into what themes and topics we present in the future. So please, while you're online, indicate here in the poll what you'd like to see and complete the short survey. There's no time like the present. Thank you. If you want to be involved in our working group to help us develop the next forum, please reach out to the team. The email address will be in the chat now. And a short evaluation survey will be sent to all attendees straight after this event. Or you can scan the QR code on the screen now. There's also a link in the chat function. So there's no time like the present, please, as I said, before you log off the event. Lastly, if you'd like to stay up to date with all things Transport Network Forum, please subscribe to the mailing list and share it with your colleagues. And a couple of things today, I got a hearing about the state of the road rest areas for Rod was quite depressing. And then to hear that we're working for instead of 35, 50 years. So a couple of things I started this presentation with, but ending on a high with those hints and tips from Sue. So thank you. Thanks again for everyone for joining us. Have a great day and stay safe. Thank you.